All right, our last topic then in this chapter on strings is command line arguments. Many of you have probably never used the command line before. You've always used the mouse, but we're going to introduce now the command line. Right. We're going to first start by altering our main function. We started by leaving our parameter list in main empty. Now we're going to add two parameters to it. The first one is named argc. It stands for an argument count. Its data type is integer. And the second then parameter is actually an array of strings. So you'll see it defined as char star argv empty brackets or char star star argv, meaning it's an array of strings. And so what we're going to find out now is that we can pass arguments to our program. So when our program starts running, it'll still start running from main, but we're going to pass some information to our main function and make use of that. And so this parameter argc will be the count of the number of arguments. Well, the arguments will be strings, right? So it'll be a count of strings that we pass to our program. The second parameter then is the arg vector, right? argv is an array of strings containing each of the command line arguments. So argv stands for argument vector, right? And we'll see that always argv at index 0 is going to be a string, the name of the program executable file. And then argv at argc, so argc is the total count, right? That will contain the null pointer. That is information that's beyond or one string beyond. So that will always contain the null pointer. Similarly, if you think about it, right, if we create an, let's say we have 2 is our argument count, the number 2. That means we should have argv at index 0, argv at index 1. So if argc is 2, argv at index 2 will not exist. It will just then contain the null pointer. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and create some sort of code blocks project that we can go ahead and look at the name of the executable. All right. But what we'll do is then we're going to go ahead and create this project named My Project. I'm going to save it here on my desktop. We're going to start taking a look at the files that are in there and how we can pass information to it. All right, so I've been working out of this code blocks project here. I'm going to close it down. Right, its name is strings. I want to make it match the slides. All right. So if we start code blocks, I don't know why I completely shut code blocks outside of being tired, not paying attention. I'll wait for this to restart. Create a new project. All right, I'll just make it a console application. Say go here. And actually, let's see if I did that in the slide. Yeah, I made it a console application. All right, so that's what we're going to do. All right, so I entitled this My Project to match the slides. Notice by default, I'm saving it on my desktop on this machine. It creates then a file inside there, myproject.cbp, that's your code blocks project file. And if I say next, right, I'm going to let it have both a debug and a release configuration. So I'll say finish. When we do that, right, we get our familiar hello world program in here. Right, but let's go ahead now and take a look. I'm going to minimize a few things here so we can see my desktop. So here on my desktop, it created code blocks in this folder. So let's double click and let's look inside this file folder. This file folder is also known as a directory. Inside here, it created main.c and myproject.cbp. So no other files yet. All right, if I go back to code blocks here, all right, let's just go ahead and tell it we want to compile. So now when we compile, all right, let's go back and look at our folder. Now, after that compilation step, it created another folder or directory called obj for object files. And because I'm working in the debug environment by default, right, now it created this debug folder, and here it created this object file. Right, it's going to need that object file to perform the final step to link in any libraries I'm including here, standard library and standard IO.h. Actually, it's pulled in information out of those header files. It's going to link against any sort of dynamic link libraries it needs and build the executable. So here we haven't built the executable. All the compilation step did was give us our object file. Now if I go to build, right, now we look in this folder, we have another folder called bin. Bin stands for binary, right? Bin has our executable files, they're binary files. And in the debug environment, so in this folder, right, now we have something called myproject.exe. So when you do that build step, it always creates an executable. In the Windows environment, the executables end with this .exe extension, right? And whenever you start a program in Windows, you're always running an executable. So if I were to double click on this, what happened is very quickly that terminal window popped up. It actually printed hello world and it closed. There's nothing in here to keep that open. But what I did was I ran the executable this build. In the same way here, if I hit run, right, we get this nice terminal window, we see hello world. Code Blocks is doing us the favor of actually keeping this open at this time, right? Now when I press any key, then it ends. So if I want to run then from the environment by double clicking my executable, what I'll do here is I'm just going to put in a printf, press enter key to continue. And then I'll just use get char to just simply read in characters. And so now let's rebuild this. Let's build. Right, if I do build and run, or if I run from here, right, we get this, I had the enter key, and then we get this code block still holds it open, right, so I have to hit enter again. But now, from here, when we rebuilt this executable, right, let's double click on this. Now, by adding that code, where I'm waiting then for somebody to press an enter key, I can keep this window open then from the Windows operating system. Right now, we can see our hello world is here. Right, I press the key and this shuts. So what I did was I just went ahead and executed then this executable using the mouse for double clicking, as we understand how to do that. All right, we've been taught to do that. All right, so we created this step. Right, so we've gone through these steps then in your slides of where we go ahead and we find this executable, right? In my example, I have hello students instead of hello world. But now let's take a look at how we can run this from the command line. Right. So what we're going to do is actually these slides were made for Windows 7. I'm going to be working from 8. This will work for you in 10 as well. We want then to open up the command prompt, right? So we're going to type CMD in our search window, right? And that is the command line interface. So let's minimize this here and here, right? I'm going to change hello world, right, to hello students. Let me just rebuild that here. All right. Let's minimize this, and let's minimize this folder here. All right, so in Windows 8.1, I'm going to pop this up for my search, and now I'm going to type CMD, and that is my command prompt. That's what I want. And now it opens up this window, right? And so by default, it's in my users directory. My name here is my username on my machine is Diane, and if I want to see what this directory encompasses, this is what we used to use before we had Windows. We had these these console windows where we actually typed in all our commands and ran everything. So if I want to see a list of files that's in here, in Windows I can type dir for directory. And what it did now, it gave me a list of files that don't all fit in one screen, so I can make this a little bigger, scroll up and down. All right, so it's showing me then, I've got some other files here, right? I've got some folders. And notice wherever it has dir in these brackets here means this is the name of a directory. The name of a directory is the same thing as the name of a folder. Right? So if I want to get to my desktop, that's a directory that's listed here from then my home. So in order to get there, I type cd for change directory, space, capital D, ESKTOP, and I can use, if I don't want to type the whole thing, I can use tab to autocomplete. But if I change directory to desktop, Notice now it shows my path as users, Diane, desktop. So that means I'm in the desktop directory. This is my path then. If I type dir again, right, here are the names of all the folders and files on my desktop, right? I've got shortcuts and things like that as well too. In this case, we can see then that here there's a folder called my project, right? That's the one I just made for code block. So now I'd like to get inside that directory. So I'm going to type cd my, and I'm going to hit tab for autocomplete. So I just type the first couple characters. If my is unique, I didn't have anything else that started with my, it just finishes with my project. I hit the enter key, and once again, if I type dir, I can see I'm inside that folder. Just in the same way as here I was using the File Explorer, right? We can see them here, my project. Pull that up here. Right, when we're in that folder, we have a directory called bin and a directory called obj. Here's my directory called bin. Here's my directory called obj. I have 3 files. I have main.c, my project.cbp, and my project.depend for some dependencies. Right. And if I want to now go in, we use the mouse, right? Before we use the mouse to go into this binary file by double clicking, and then we wanted to go into debug. Well, if I want to change into that same directory, I want to change it. So cd space b, I hit the tab for autocomplete, / d, /d. So /d for debug. So I can go through more than one directory at once. If I know my path, I can type that, hit the enter key. You can see my prompt has changed. If I type dir, right now here I am inside here. You can see that we have one file, the executable myproject.exe. So what happens if I type myproject.exe and I hit the enter key? Well, it actually runs that executable. I'm running this from the command line. We call this a command line interface. What I've been doing is typing a series of commands, right, to get then to the directory where I want to run the program that I want. I type the name of the executable and hit the enter key, and it runs it. So this is what we saw, what we got when we double clicked or with code blocks was run. Right, so I'll hit this enter key to continue. Right, once again, I'm back here then in this environment. So this was showing you some commands that you need to list. So dir lists all the files and folders in that directory. Cd changes directories, right? If I want to go back up, if I know the name, if I want to go back up and go to my home directory, I can. If I do cd ... I always go back up one, so I'm in bin. Oh, sorry, I typed ls, and that's a Linux Unix command, dir. So I can see I can go back up. Cd debug, I can go back inside here, see that my executable's here. Right, I can change paths and do various other things. Right, we won't worry about all these commands, but what we wanted to see was then this command shell. That's what we got here. Right, I started from my home directory and walked through there. Now, Windows 7, Windows 10, Windows 8, you can find then a list of different command line references. You want to know different commands that you can run. I've just used 2, right? But you can, this will take you for Windows 7. A lot of these will work in 8 and 10, or you can do a specific Google search to find those for Windows 8 and 10. So the dir command, right, was used to display a list of files and folders. It also gave me other information, such about the hard drive serial number, total number of files listed, their combined size, total amount of free space left on the drive. So it gives you lots of information, dir, right? This is just an example from my screen. So remember when I was in my home screen, we had too many to list, right? Before this was smaller here. So let me go back to cd. No. Actually, yeah, I'm using Linux commands. I never do this in Windows. cd. Forgotten my command to go back to my root directory, and now I've done something else with keystrokes to bring up what I don't want. So I went up a few levels. Right, I'm at my desktop. Right now I'm just in users Diane. Remember when I typed dir before we got this whole list? Well, I can type dir, that's a command for directory, right? I'm executing a program. So when I type dir, I'm executing a program. I can then do the vertical pipe, the bar, space more, and that says go ahead and take what directory outputs, this list of folders, pipe it to more. What more does is more just shows me as much as can fit on the screen at once. And then if I hit the enter key, it just keeps showing the additional, right? Until if I keep hitting it, I'll eventually get to the end and I just get back to my command prompt. There's other commands as well you can type, right, to control then what displays. Navigation, CD was the shorthand version for change directory. You can also type CHDIR for change directory as well. Right. And we can navigate around. Now this next one I'll skip over because this is actually DIR. That was my desktop at that time. Right, we walked through all of these. We ran the executable. We want to come back now and look at the idea of how we're going to pass some information to main. Right, we have then this command line. And what we want to do is we want to then basically pass some information into our main program. So here's main's parameters again. We're going to change main, so we have int argc. We can have char star star argv, right? And we have these two parameters. Argc is going to be the count of arguments, right? Argv is going to be an array of strings containing each of the command line arguments. Argv at index 0 will be the name of the executable file. Right. What we're going to do is we're just going to have a simple program that is then going to print out how many parameters we have and the values stored in each one. Right. So, and I gave this to you in a program actually called command line example 1 as well. But let's just go ahead and copy this in here. All right, so let's overwrite our hello world. But I don't really need the standard library for this. I do need standard IO for printf. So notice then, now I have these two parameters, right? argc, argv. And char star star, a pointer to a pointer, you can kind of think of that as a two-dimensional array. I can have a pointer to a pointer. You thought pointers were bad, now we have pointers to pointers. All right, we'll get better with these. And so we're going to print out now, main has two parameters, argc and argv. And we're going to show the values stored in argc. So right now, right, I'm just going to comment out this for loop. Let's just print out what's stored in argc. I can now use then this name argc because it's been defined here, right? It's been declared as a parameter. I can use it in my code. All right. Let's clean out that workspace. Let's build and run. And here, right, we can see that main has two parameters. So this is just literally printing out this string, right? Here, now when we're printing out the string value stored in argc, well, it substitutes in here for this %d, right? In this case, I've only got one argument. So by default, when I run from this, the only information passed is the name of the executable program, the actual directory path. So here, if we turn this off or turn this back on, okay, I'm sending I equals 0. As long as I is less than the argument count, right, I'm just going to print out argv at index I, index 0. All right, so we're going to show which argument, and we're just going to print that out. So let's build and run here. All right, so we can see argv at index 0 was this whole path and this whole C, users, Diane, desktop, my project, bin, debug, my project.exe. All right, if we go back here to the command line, well, I need to go back to my desktop, so I'm going to cd into desk top, my project wasn't, I was trying to use tab for autocomplete, and it's / here in Windows, my project, and then we had the bin, and then we had debug. Right, if I do that, right? Here's where we have my project.exe. So you can see here's my path here. See users, Diane, desktop, my project, bin debug. That's where my executable is. That's what got passed in here, right? So whenever I hit run here, this whole path, including the name of my executable, what it's doing is it's running that program. All right, so let's maybe put a couple more spaces here so we can see this. Then argument line, once again, actually, let me stop that here. Now, I also want to do this printf, press enter key to continue here. I know code blocks will hold this open for me, but when I run it from the command line, I want the window to stay open. And let's build. Build and run from code blocks, right? Our argument count was 1. By default, it passes the name of the executable, right? I press my enter key then here, and this ends. So let's maybe then throw that a couple lines down. Let's rebuild this. Right now from the command line, right? Just like we did before, the name of my executable is my project.exe. Let's run this. Right, so main has 2 parameters, argc and argv. The value stored in the argument count was 1. This got 1 argument, right? Argv here was my project.exe. So from within the command line, since I'm already at this particular path, all Windows did was actually passed in, then this is the string, my project.exe. Enter key to continue, right? From here, when I'm running this here, in order to run, Windows has, where it depends on, code blocks and where your path is. Windows actually has to pass this whole path to that. That's why the difference there. The idea is that argv at index 0 will always be the name of my executable, always. And by default, that is 1 argument that's always passed here. Now, the other notation I showed you in the slide was that we could do the pointer with the empty bracket. So let's just show that that still works as well. Right, that still works just the same. So it's just another notation. This says this is an array of pointers to chars. Well, an array is a pointer itself. This is an array of pointers to chars as well, too, or a pointer to a pointer. So either one of those notations work. Right, notice here when we were saying argv at this index, right, that is a string. So there could be several string arguments, right? So we use then the %s to print out the string. Now, let's take a look at how we might pass multiple arguments. So back here from the command line, right, let's just show again, if we do my project.exe and hit the enter key, there's that 1 argument. So my project.exe, and let me pass some other information. Hello, pointers, right? So I'm going to pass then 3 different strings. Notice now my argument count is 3, and here are the 3 individual strings that I pass. Right? So this separates this out, right? What it does is it's space delimited, white space delimited. So it pulls up this first one as 1 argument. This is argv1, hello, and then pointer. So I can start passing string information into my program, right? I did that in this instance by directly typing this on the command line, right? So up arrow key cycles through history, shows me the most recent thing I typed. Here, this is the most recent thing I typed. So what I'm doing is my project.exe, this is getting it to run my program, and then this is also allowing me to pass some information into the main function. Right? So we'll want to then start taking that information and using that information in our program would be our next step. And that's what we mean by command line interface. Now, if you don't want to run your programs from the command line, then what code blocks allows you to do, which is what this next series of slides starts talking about, it shows you how to run then the program from code blocks and how to set arguments, right? Here, so if you want to set command line arguments in code blocks, I'm going to go to Project, set programs arguments. And by default, right, I'm in the debug target. Now, you don't type the name of the executable here, but now, remember before I typed hello and then I typed pointers? So I space to limit my arguments here. I just say okay. Now when I hit run, it will pass those additional arguments. So now when we hit run, we can see that we got then this long path in the name of our executable. We got hello, we got pointers. Right. So that's a way for you to still run from within the IDE, but go ahead and then pass arguments. So that was under project, set programs arguments. And then if I put these on separate lines, right, does this work? I didn't need to rebuild, I just rerun, it still works. So because they're white space delimited. All right, so that's what this the slides walks you through, is how you set different arguments in here. Right? And they can be dates, they can be numbers. All right, so let's take a look in this example. I gave you dates. Let's go back to code blocks. And let's go back to project, set command line arguments. All right, so if in this case, then the date here is 3/12/2017. If I wanted to pass this in, notice there's no white space in here. So it should tell me now when I go ahead and run here. Sorry, when I run, I have two arguments, right? First is the executable, the next one is this string. Now, if I go back to these set programs arguments and I start white space delimiting some of this stuff, right? I've got spaces now in between of all of these. I'm going to see I have a lot more arguments, right? It separates all those out. So white space delimits then the strings. Similarly, I could run the same thing from here, right? I can run my project .exe. If I type 3/12/2017, all is one string, right? It shows me I have those two arguments. Right, what we'll do then is we'll start using some of the string library functions to actually start working with these command line arguments. At this point then, you know how to pass this information in. Right. You could alter this program then. Here, this is in a key to continue. Right. What I could do in here is I could say something. I could do a string comparison. I could say if string compare. And I wanted to compare then one of these, so argv at index I. If I want to compare that to hello, what I'm looking for is I'm going to say, did the user enter hello? Right? So is the string hello one of the command line arguments? If it is, right, then I might want to do something. Oh, I can print a simple message. I can say true, hello is a command line argument, right? We want to do more than print things from our program, but the purpose of this is to show you, right, so string comparison, that was a function from a previous lecture. We take then this string, we compare it to this string. Remember, whenever they're equal, so this function will return a 0 whenever these two strings are equal. So I'll just compare it to equal, right, or to 0 to say those are equal, right? And I could have a false branch, but let's just build and run with this. And let's see, what did I miss here? Oh, that should be printf, not print. And didn't print that out because this is running with then these old arguments. So project, set project arguments, right? Pointers, ELEC, 1520, hello. Right, hello will be one of those arguments. Build and run. Actually, I just needed to run. I didn't need to build and run. Right. Now, we printed out all those arguments, but when this one was hello, then we saw that this test was true. So we're going to start using string compare to start looking at the arguments that are passed to main, right? And based on certain arguments, we'll then want to perform certain actions in our code. All right, now I gave you one other example that I want to take a look at in terms of what we call parsing command line arguments. That was out on my desktop. I think I started under strings. That one. It must be this one. Yeah. All right, so I gave you all right, let's remove main. Let's add this file, the active project. Right, it's in another directory, so we'll see that directory path there. Here's then a program that will actually then check command line arguments. So this says the program will terminate if the user does not enter at least 3 command line arguments. And so in this case, let me clean my workspace. Let me rebuild for the new one. Comparison between signed and unsigned. Oh, simply because string length returns an unsigned. Let's say cast that to a signed. So I get rid of that warning. All right. String length returns unsigned. I casted the result to a signed because when I made I and j ints, they happen to be signed. So I want to get rid of that warning. All right, so here's what's going to happen. If we have less than 3 command line arguments, so let's just go ahead and take all of these arguments out of here. So we're going to have less than 3. We're just going to print out then a message, and this is going to say usage strings.exe. Well, if I'm in a project called strings.exe, that's the name of my executable, right? Dash max. So at a minimum, I have to type in at least 2 arguments. Actually, 3 arguments. So let's run this. So here's what happened, right? Because argc, in this case, our program arguments then were empty, right? Because this then was less than 3. We printed out this message that we're trying to tell the user how to use this, right? Go ahead and use the name of the executable. It should be followed by dash max, and then it should probably actually have another number, right? Since this is less than 3, let's see. So this is just telling us then to have at least 3. Let's run this from the command line. All right, dir. So here's my project. And if I say my project.exe, right, we only get that 1 argument, and this comes up with the uses message. Here now, then, I want to go ahead and say my project.exe. I don't have to do the dash max. I'll do hello again. Notice what we got here is we had the 3 arguments. So since this was true, right, we went ahead then and went down here in our program. The code flowed through down here. It went through this for loop, and it simply printed out all of these arguments for us, right? And here it's printing out the string. Here it's telling us what the string length is as well. So it's saying then it's going through here, and it's actually printing this out then character by character. Right. So let's take a look at this by stepping through this. I've got a lot of things going on in here. Probably would have been better if we'd have developed this together. All right, so this is forcing the user to type 3 things. We really don't care what they are. So the usage message doesn't make quite as much sense. Maybe dash max and dash min. Okay, so here in this case, if the user has entered less than 3 things, our program is going to terminate, right? Otherwise, then when this condition is not true, we're going to come down here and we're simply going to print out the command line arguments. Let's comment out this section. Take a look at what we're getting here. So if we do a run to cursor, right, actually what we get is the fact that, sorry, this is still up from my command line. It's a little hard to go back and forth between this environment. Let's go in here and set our program arguments. So let's just then have the name of the executable and hello. And now if I say run from here, right, we get this usage message simply because our argument count was 2. That was less than 3. It says type in 3 things. And so we didn't fall through. So now let's just add in another argument. So hello, ELEC, maybe 50. Let's add in one more. All right, so we'll have 3 here. And now we can just run. And now, since we passed then, this test was true. We just came down here, and this loop again shows us how to walk through and use the strings then to go ahead and print out each one of these arguments. Right. And that printed then each one on a separate line. Now, if you want to print them, if you want to access them as individual characters, that's what this example is showing you. So let's then turn this off here. Let's turn off this loop, and what we're going to do is we're going to walk through, right, all of our arguments, and we're going to use the string length. We could look for the null terminator. The other option is, as long as j is less than the string length, right, it will then print out all the characters in the string. So we're accessing them character by character here. And I have to rebuild because I changed the program, but notice now what it did was we got hello and ELEC, right, and the name of our executable. So right there, right there, and right there. So we got the 3 arguments. So the point of this is, if you want to get to an individual character, well, then here you can do something like this, right? You'd find yourself writing this, though, if you really needed to just print out all of the strings. So this one, again, was just a reminder of this lower one of how to access the individual array elements, the 2D elements. This one allows you to access the strings. Right, so what you're going to do then, you'll have some homework where you're going to have to compare some of this command line information then to certain words, and your program will have to perform certain actions based on those words. Right, so you'll be using the string comparison for that. Right, so now you have an idea of what the command line is. Right, you can run yours from Windows. If you're using a Mac, you've got a terminal application. Right, you can run things from your terminal. If you're using Linux, you can run from that terminal as well. Right, this finally then ends our unit on strings. The command line, entering things from the command line to affect the way your program runs, is a very useful tool